Okay, lineouts 101. So like we said, basic setup of lineouts as we go along tonight. Should have a fair understanding of your basic requirements and should be good to go. Lineouts are typically probably the easiest thing to referee if you know, in terms of your basic setup and process. However, if you don't pay attention to details, it can be an absolute disaster and really affect your game on the day. Just starting off, we're going to touch on the touch laws. They have changed within the last couple of years a few times, so making sure everybody's as clear as they can be on the touch laws. Ball or ball carrier touches the touch line, touch and goal line, or anything beyond. A player who is already touching the touch line, touch and goal line, or anything beyond catches or holds the ball. The ball has reached the plane of touch when it is caught. The catcher is not deemed to have taken it into touch. The ball has not reached the plane of touch when it is caught or picked up. The catcher is deemed to have taken the ball into touch. Pretty straightforward on that one. So in terms of your ARing, main thing to be aware of is where is the ball? Does it break the plane? And then the ball is not in touch. I'll let you read that yourself. And then we have a couple of clips. Like I said, you have the playlist on YouTube. Some of the video that comes through on this is maybe not as great. This first one has to do with jumping from in the field of play to keep a ball alive.
After that pushover try from Uruguay.
Let's talk about some volleyball skills.
So in the past, you used to have that player land in the field of play. Now it doesn't matter. He's in the field of play. He jumps. Doesn't matter really where the ball is. He's able to knock it back in the field of play before touching the ground outside of play. So it's play on. Pretty straightforward. Key thing to know here is where is the plane and did the player step on the line or step in touch before jumping. Then the plane comes into action. This is an example of the opposite where the player does step in touch.
With good territory out of this as well. So it works in their favor. But I think some of those emotions, we saw them flare up right at the end of that half.
So you can see the player puts a foot in touch and then goes to bat the ball. Therefore, he's out, so the ball is in touch. It remains the team's penalty.
With good. Quick
throw. Player who carries the ball into touch must release the ball immediately so that a quick throw may be taken. Sanction is a penalty. Pretty straightforward. That means they need to release the ball. You see this a lot more in 7s. In 15s, it's really not as common to make too big a deal out of it. There's usually a bit of like wrestling for the ball, but nothing a referee couldn't manage. At a quick throw, the ball is thrown in between the mark of touch and the thrower's own goal line and parallel to or towards the thrower's own goal line, and so that it reaches the 5-meter line before it touches the ground or hits a player. And by a player whose feet are both outside the field of play. Sanction option of lineout or scrum. So if they mess up the quick throw in any way, they either throw it forward or they step in the field of play. It's option of a 5-meter of a lineout or a scrum. If players prevent the ball from traveling 5 meters, then we get to a free kick. So a quick throw is disallowed and a lineout is awarded to the same team if lineout has been formed, ball has been touched after it went into touch, so the quick throw is disallowed. A different ball is used, so different ball, no quick throw on, and then the ball must reach 5-meter line or before it is played, and a player must not prevent the ball from traveling 5 meters. Free kick. That is specifically to a quick throw. If the mark of touch is outside the 22, the team may take the quick throw inside the 22, but is deemed to have been taken the ball into the 22, so they don't get a gain in ground. So really important as an AR to keep an eye on that as well. So like I said, quick throw is still on until the lineout is formed. Lineout is formed when oftentimes we have players that run right in front of the thrower. They scream mark, and they think that's sufficient enough. That's not sufficient enough. A lineout is formed. 2 players from each team between the 5 meter and the 15 meter line within the general area of, if you want to get specific, on the line of touch. So the lineout is not formed. The quick throw is still on. If we have 1 player from each team, still on. 2 players from one team, the throwing team, still on. Now, keep in mind, you still have to have the other options available. The ball has to be live. No one else has had to have touched it. Lineout still on. Quick throw is taken, and the team scores in the corner. So if we just go to the replay, at no point in this picture do we see a player from each team, 2 players from each team forming a lineout. So therefore, despite the slight delay, the quick throw is still on and a try is scored. So it's really important as an AR to keep in mind, if you see the AR here, he just has his flag up in the air. The arm is not out. So his arm's not out. He hasn't indicated that the lineout has been formed. So the quick throw is still on. So a little bit of a mental cue for the AR as well. Referee and AR sees the arm's not out, so the quick throw must still be on. It's taken and scored in the corner. Pretty straightforward. Many aspects, just a little guide to this. Many aspects of the lineout infringements, formation, etc. Closing the gap, early jump can be managed by referees by just resetting rather than penalizing, or managing as the game goes along, unless the infringement substantially benefits the offending team or is continually repeated. So that's straight out of the game management guidelines. What it's saying is essentially these things are preventable. Like I said, lineouts can be a very easy aspect of your game, but if you don't take the proper steps to form the lineout correctly, then you won't get the right outcome. So you don't want to be too pedantic over certain things, but players need to stand in the right spots, and if it happens maybe once, not a big deal. Manage those situations if possible. Formation, lineout formed on the mark of touch. Each team forms a single parallel line, pretty straightforward, between the 5 and 15 meter lines. The gap between the lines must be maintained until the ball is thrown in. So really important, as we'll go forward, gap is sort of your biggest thing that you could possibly control. Minimum of 2 players from each team are required to form a lineout. Pretty straightforward. Gap is really something you want to focus on as much as possible. If you have a big enough gap, we're talking a meter, maybe a country meter, however you want to call it. But bigger the gap, I would find the more success your lineouts are going to be. Same thing for any coaches listening tonight. If it's your throw-in, you would prefer to have as big a gap as possible. Bigger gap, less pressure on the hooker, more room to throw the ball in down a big tunnel. If it's crowded, and we'll see some clips later on, when there is virtually no gap, there's more pressure on the hooker, and they're more likely to throw it not straight or throw it to the other team's side as well. Or you're more susceptible to a turnover. So here's your basic formation of a lineout. Pretty straightforward. 2 players from each team. Don't forget, to have a lineout, we need a player within the 5 meter. So essentially, we're talking about 6 whole players to form a lineout. So I need a thrower, I need a player opposite the thrower, and then I need 2 players from each team to form the lineout on the line of touch. So we're sorted with that. No issue here. If we have teams want to put 3, maybe 4 in the lineout. Another team might want to put 2 or 3 or less. Point is, if they want to go less, they can go less. No problem there. They match up. Other option here, remember they can have a receiver. The receiver needs to be 2 meters from the line of touch. Specific 2 meters nowadays. It used to be from 2 meters to 10 meters. I'm not sure if that's a law change or just a miscommunication in the laws, but don't want to be too crazy about it. They just need to be off the line of touch and clearly defined as the receiver. They can only have 1 receiver, so oftentimes you might see players sort of lingering 9 meters from the lineout. They need to all be back 10 or behind the goal line, whichever is closer. Other options, defending team can have a receiver, no issues there. And then also, if the throwing in team chooses not to have a receiver, that doesn't mean that the defending team can't have their own receiver. So 3 players in the lineout, 3 players in the lineout, the receiver does not count towards that formation. Something that just as you go along in the game, building that rapport sort of with the team to not have any issues with numbers in the lineouts. I think numbers in the lineouts is always something that people, sometimes they struggle with, sometimes they don't. People ask, like, well, it's not the team's requirement to tell you the numbers. No, it's not your requirement to tell me the numbers, but you can maybe help me out. That is essentially your approach to numbers in the lineout. It's just one of those things. If a team's continuously changing numbers, make sure to give the defense time to match. Sometimes if teams form a lineout and then they decide to drop players, technically you could free kick them for leaving a lineout. I'm talking about before the lineout's really set and the thrower's ready to throw. Before any of that, players might leave the lineout, and if it's too late and if you want to continue on, you could say numbers off in the lineout. And then play on from there. But it's really something you don't want players coming in and out of the lineout, and you want to make sure they form. We have a couple of examples of that later on. But just making sure that the lineout's formed, players have identified themselves as being a part of the lineout. You know your positions. You've got a thrower, you've got an opposite thrower. It's really important, especially as an AR. You can assist in getting that player within the channel, and then clearly defining who your halfbacks are if you have them, and that there's only one. All right, so like we said, just some discussion around formation. Some teams, we want to prevent this as much as we can, so we don't want teams to huddle outside of the line of touch, and we don't want teams to walk in as the ball is being thrown. So a couple things in this clip. You don't want to allow teams to linger. Excuse me. You don't want to allow teams to linger outside the line of touch. You also don't want them to walk in on the throw-in. So they've never formed the line out. They're susceptible to free kick. Really something you want to try to manage out of as much as possible. But, I mean, eventually if a team's not going to listen, then they have to then they pay the price, which in this case is a free kick. But like we said, we want to make sure we get that formation down. We don't have teams walking in and going. The exception to that is if a team just wants to play quick. So there's quick throw in is what we talked about, but a quick line out, you don't necessarily have to follow as many of the guidelines. If the defense can't line up quick enough and one team's ready to go, they form their line out and the ball's thrown in, you want to let them play on. So it's the attacking team's benefit to play as quickly as possible, and you should allow them to do that if a line out is properly formed. So quick throw and quick line out, two separate things. Just need to be aware that you set things up properly. So same goes for a quick throw, making sure that quick line out is set up properly with the thrower and the team forming the line with no delay, and then the ball comes in. So pretty straightforward. That can often be confusing in the heat of the moment when you're ARing, but something to look out for. Any questions behind that? Just type them in. So another thing about formation with the halfbacks, so any player in the lineout can change positions provided that they don't do they swap positions or they leave after the ball is left in the hands of the thrower. So with the receiver, so a receiver can enter the lineout as long as a teammate changes position. Pretty straightforward. He goes in. First player goes out, no problems there. Where you get yourself into trouble is when there's been a throw in. There's been a throw in, and a player enters the line out before the ball has left the thrower's hands, and no one has taken their place. So really need to make sure that they do swap places. The ball's left the hands of the thrower like it is here. The receiver's okay to enter the line out. They can do whatever they want. They can get lifted. Whatever they want to do. So no problems there. Now we've had the ball's left the hands of the thrower. It's been caught in the middle. We have a maul that's getting ready to form. So at this point, the lineout is still not over. We're on the line of touch and just using these boxes as a form of the lineout. So the lineout's not over until it's moved completely off the line of touch. So we've gone from here. Ball's now at the back. It's moving forward, still not off the line of touch. So the lineout is still not over. Wherever the referee is, if they're on the near side or the open side, the hand is still up. You're still holding back the opposition to not be 10. Now the maul is completely moved off the line of touch, and now the lineout is over. So pretty straightforward. Completely off the line of touch. Now the lineout's over. Both teams can now come up. There is no back 10 for either side. It's just as important for the attacking side when you're holding them all up in a lineout. Neither team can join, so if a shove's not on the attack, you can't throw more players into the lineout. Something you really just need to be on top of. So formation, we have a lineout throw. Throw goes to the front. So same deal. When is the lineout over? The lineout's over when the player carrying the ball is entered between the 5 meter and the touch line. So again, if they maul right inside that 5 meter, lineout's not over. Once they've moved towards the touch line, then the lineout is over. Referee would lower their arm, and players can come forward. So pretty straightforward. Inside the 5, and then off the line of touch, and then the last one over the 15. Maul's caught, so it's either caught on the side, on the near side of the 15 meter line, or outside the 15 meter line, and then moves outside of it. So once it moves outside of it, then the lineout is over, and players can come up Other thing is with long throw-ins. Just remember, long throw-ins, any player can take off. So say the ball leaves the hands of the thrower. That's your timing. One of these players that's back 10 runs forward to catch the ball. They're perfectly fine to do that. So as long as the ball has traveled over the 15. So if this black player has come forward to catch a ball, but it's been caught off the top, then they are liable to penalty for being offside. Again, one of those situations where you can manage them to go back 10. So like we see, long throw-in situation where both players come up and go after the ball. So lineout's over in that situation, no problem there. And then
spot on with
just an example here. Just an example here of the maul moving off the line of touch completely.
They've been quite creative and crafty in their execution.
So pretty good indicator. The 5-meter line is the line of touch. So just making sure the back line is held until they come in.
Zapata in for Baldunciel. Puts it in, and they're going to go to the driving wall again. They scored off this earlier.
Spot on with.
So once that comes up,
they're creative and crafty in their execution.
We'll see what they do as Axel Zapata in for Baldunciel. Puts it in, and they're going to go to the driving wall again. They scored.
Then the team goes forward, and then the lineout's over. Pretty straightforward, but again, if you don't pay attention to this, when the lineout is over, you'll have some issues on your hands with teams coming forward. More in open play. This is down by the goal line, but something you need to remember, especially if you have ARs, it's difficult for an AR to hold a team back 10 if you're unsure when the lineout is actually even over. So really need to be careful as a referee to make sure you're still communicating that, not just to the teams, but to your team of 3 as well. Just an example here of no gap in the lineout. So something that you want to try to do as much as you can, if you got opportunities with natural lines on the field, is to set the defense on a natural line. So in this case, putting the white and blue team on the 22-meter line with the hope that there might be a gap in the lineout. So pretty clear defined line for the defense. Let's see if the attack holds that line.
Disconnect. That was actually a very good pass from the scrum half. And he just, number 14, Asadka just couldn't hold on to it.
No space between those lineouts. Argentina comes.
So, I mean, essentially, yes, the defense maybe moves in a step or two, but the attack, more than anything, completely closes their own lineout. So it's one of those where if you're happy with sloppy play and sloppy lineouts, feel free to carry on. But it's one of those where you have to send a message to the front players from both teams that they need to keep the gap. I don't understand, there shouldn't be too many teams in an attacking lineout situation that would be opposed to having a gap. Like we said, bigger gap, less pressure on the hooker, less pressure on them to get the ball directly down the middle. So it's a benefit to both sides to have the gap. So again,
a disconnect. That was actually a very good. But he just, number 14, Asadka just couldn't hold on to it.
No space between those lines.
So if you have a situation where, say, the Uruguayan team is standing essentially outside of the line, somewhere around here, if the defense steps forward and closes the gap, they've crossed the 22-meter line, made it clear and obvious, and it's an easy free kick decision. When both teams close the gap, it leaves a little bit of, leaves no space within the lineout, as we can tell. but it makes a decision from a referee just as difficult. So one of those where you could just blow the whistle, stop the whole line out, reinforce your standard. I want you to stand here. I need you to hold your own line out open, or something around that. So I understand it's your line out. You still need to keep the gap, or I'll free kick you, or you're liable to free kick, something around that, around those lines. However you want to reinforce that message is up to you, but like I said, gap is the most important thing of getting off a good line out. Without gap, you're very unlikely to have clean ball. So those are your sort of your key triggers. Behind that, no gap, you're gonna have sloppy ball at the top, and you're gonna have a rough go about it. So any kind of questions around line out gap? Okay, I guess not. Alright, so we'll get into this little bit. It's just going to be around your basic positioning. So here we have your basic position for middle of the field line out. So you have a couple of options. First option is typically to stand somewhere in this general area, usually in line or just outside the attacking team, somewhere where your field of vision sort of would include, say all of this, and then you could even expand that to see the hooker. You want to possibly see the hooker as well, so you could even step back a little bit, so your field of vision is a little bit more open. Pretty basic line out positioning. Another option is at the top. So again, sort of just off the line of the attacking team, field of vision, sort of looking down the line here, and then also towards the back line. So benefit to this is back line can clearly see you. Downside of this is if the throw goes to the front pod, then you're a little bit out of position and you need to quickly move closer to see something, or you'll have difficulty seeing any kind of infringement or issue at the front of the line out. With an AR in play, it's typically a good idea to go to the back of the line out, and your assistant referee covers the front. Just sort of has all your bases covered. So if you're at the back of the line out, you really shouldn't have any issues with offside. That should be pretty clearly handled within the team of three. So we have position here. Another issue or another variation, you could stand right on the tunnel. Some people are a little bit opposed to that, but no major issue. Again, as long as your field of vision is not closed off. So the worst thing you want to do is just face this pod of the line out and then not pay any attention to the backs. So it's a good idea to sort of open up your hips, stand sideways, so your field of vision is essentially more focused upfield, so north and south, and then you're turning your head to look at the rest of the line out. So your body is sort of facing the goalposts, and then your head is focused on the line out. Just gives you a good perspective, especially of the gap. if teams are closing the gap or players are jumping into the gap, anything like that. So if players jump into the gap, if you jump into the gap or they move positions, they're liable to free kick. If they jump across and into a player and make contact, they're liable to be penalized. So however you want to look at it, it's a little bit more difficult to view some of the gap closures based on these couple positions. Down the middle is your best option there. But again, if you're using clearly defined lines, it makes your life much easier based on wherever you are positioned. One of the downsides is you want to be very careful about how deep you get in the back position of the lineout. So you don't want to get in sort of this 9-10 channel where you might catch a pass in the face. So just something to consider. If you're going to take up this position, it's no issue. Just be aware that you probably need to move a bit forward as play goes along, and then turn your body to face this direction to naturally turn with the pass like you would for a tackle. One of the worst things you can do is you sort of, as the maul moves forward, you sort of stay planted and then don't move with the maul, and then sort of find yourself between the 9 and the 10. So just something to be aware of in that scenario. Pretty straightforward on these three positions. There are a couple more. Some people like to maybe get a little bit closer. I don't necessarily see a benefit of that. You want to try to stay out of the contest area. Other option in open play, you could put yourself on the defensive side, but very rarely would you find yourself at the front of a lineout on the defensive side, standing next to the opposite thrower. It's very unlikely. Most of the time, if a team is going to go quick, they're going to try to get the ball as wide as possible away from their lineout. So being at the back of the lineout is a good idea to get yourself a bit jump started on that. As the ball maybe gets thrown in a lineout, say the ball starts to get thrown in, if you're at the front pod, you might want to start moving sort of as the ball moves as well. So keep yourself, somewhere around 7 meters from the ball and making sure you're moving with play. So one of those things, just to go back for a second, making sure that we are, we'll get more in depth on this as we go along in the fall with our Lineout Masterclass. So again, we're at Lineout 101. Making sure the ball stays at the front until the ball is formed. So ball carrier needs to keep the ball up front, and then the contact comes, and then play goes on as the ball gets moved to the back. Oftentimes you have lineouts where players want to sack. Nothing wrong with a sack, but remember, if you're going to allow a sack, it has to be on the catcher when their feet hit the ground immediately. And then in that situation, that play is actually considered a tackle. So it's not a maul, otherwise we wouldn't allow them to pull it down. So it's a tackle situation, and because it's a tackle situation, the ball needs to be made available by the defender. So just something to think about. So we'll get into goal line position, slightly different. All your main position categories are still in play. However, there are positives and negatives to that that put you in certain positions that don't necessarily work. So I've put sort of your basic outline of 6 different sets of positioning you could probably take in a lineout based on, positives and negatives. Standard position on the attacking side is okay. However, you sort of put yourself a little bit far away from the goal line. So if they go to a front pod, quick maul situation, you're in great position to referee that. But if they break the line, you need to be there at the goal line to make a quick decision. So probably best to take the opposite of that and stand on the defensive end. So again, if you have an AR, or maybe you don't, it's sort of irrelevant, especially if you don't have an AR, then you really need to get somewhere near the goal line where it's most important for you to see the score. So goal line position, probably a good idea. You give yourself up for a gap, but again, you're sort of around by the 5-meter line. They're probably going to close it anyway. Just watch the contest. So they break through the middle. You just run directly here, and then you get to the score. Same thing if you're in the back position. So if they go front and you have to quickly change places, then run up, and then you should be fine. So same thing, you're just crossing. So it's sort of like how you would run to get in position. Nothing wrong with taking down the tunnel again. So if they go back and they roll them all in, then you just sort of fade into the goal line and follow play in. Personally, I always prefer taking the goal side. Also, another position you can put yourself defensive, sort of in a receiver position. Give yourself up for any kind of not straight throw. But if they go to a middle pod, you're directly in front of the maul, so you can quickly change places to get yourself alongside of it, and then get yourself back towards the in-goal side. So pretty straightforward. Key in this area is, like I said, the try being scored. So anything along the goal line is most important. You need to get yourself here either by coming around or just stepping through and then turning. All right, any questions around goal line positioning? We're into 45 minutes. We might get out of here in a couple of minutes, so be sure to get your questions in around the basics of the lineout. All right. Well, I guess not. So that's really all I have tonight. Like we said, this is your basic setup of the lineout. Really important, your key priorities in how to set a lineout. Be the first person at the lineout. So if the referee is there as quickly as they can, shouldn't have any issues on getting the right outcomes that you need. So in this case, gap in formation. So one of the worst things you can do as a referee is sort of lazily set up a lineout, and you find that to be most difficult when you're not actually there. So if you're here initially, set the line out. So you've given the defensive the line, you've given the attack a line. Don't really worry about making a divot in the middle of the field for the tunnel. That's not necessarily needed. So given the line for the defense, you've talked to this first player, told him to get his players in line, and then you've managed this player and had the same effect. And then you've gone and you've moved to your position either here or here or here. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to never run through the tunnel. I would say it's not a good idea, but if you're going from point A to point B, I don't know, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So if you're going to do it, run very fast. That's all I have to say. Some people might object to that. Don't run through the tunnel because they're going to throw the ball in. Yes and no. If you're going to run through the tunnel, run very quickly. So, yeah, so we've got our basic position. Because we're at the front of the lineout, we've got good gaps, we've got the right numbers, we've got everyone set up properly, and the players are back 10, and we're ready to have a clean restart. So that's really your goal as you go into lineouts. You want to have as clean a restarts as you can. So we got clearly defined gaps, numbers are good, ball comes in from the thrower and is either taken down into a maul and played, or it's batted off the top and played. So that's your job within the lineout. I think you'll find some of the club levels and even into professional leagues, it's not as easy to get the ball in a lineout as clean as possible. So it's really important as a referee you do your job to get as clear a gap and as clear a defined and set up formation as you can to get a clean restart, like we said, so we can get back to the game and not worry about rough restarts and rough lineouts. So just the same as you would in a scrum, if you're having rough scrums, your trigger in scrums is if the ball comes in and the ball goes out, then you must be having good scrums. So if the ball comes in a lineout and it comes off the top or is cleanly played from a maul or a ruck at the bottom, then the lineout should be fine. If you're getting constantly getting dirty ball or sloppy play or turnovers, then you have to look at whether or not you're setting up the lineout properly. Sometimes you may be setting it up just fine, and it'd be due to lack of skill or technique. A team can't keep possession, and that's completely fine, and that's their problem. But sometimes you have to ask yourself, like we said, if you're setting it up the way you need to. And if you're not, then go back to your basics of setting a lineout. Just a point around positioning. Most times at the beginning of a game or beginning of a half, it's probably a good idea for a referee to take the front position, to be sort of more active and more in the face of the players as you set the lineout out. If you have, one lineout for each team or two lineouts for each team and everything's fine and you're comfortable with how the lineout's going, then continue your process of setting the gap and then moving to your position wherever you want in the back of the lineout to get ready for play. And again, if you start to have more problems, then revert back to restarting your lineout process, setting the gap, and then just staying at the front. So it's sort of a continuous work on as you go through the game, just as you would with tackle or scrum. Are you continuing to get good outcomes of your lineouts? And if you're not, then revisit why that might be. All right, so pretty close to wrapping up. If you don't have any questions, then, well, let me see if I can open this. Here we go. Yes, to signal touch, just to answer a question here, so to signal touch, the flag goes up. To signal when the lineout has been formed and the quick throw is off, you would signal with the arm out to the team that is going to throw in. So that's your signal for lineout is formed, quick throws off. Both sides do not have to have a receiver. Neither team has to have a receiver. It is an option for either side. So neither team has to have a receiver. The only requirements are opposite thrower and two players in the lineout. So receiver is separate. Thank you for the question. All right. So we will have a quiz at some point later in the month to recap on our lineout process. Just make sure you read the game management guidelines. They have a good little setup. You can find that on our website. And always a good idea to just whip out the law book for a little bit and become a little bit more familiar with all the little nooks and crannies of Lineout and touch. I can tell you the touch laws can be very confusing, and if you're not 100% on them, then you're going to struggle sometimes. So just something to think about. Like I said, quiz coming out. Make sure your Who's the Ref availability is getting updated. Our regional officers are pretty good about pumping out those emails every couple of weeks. So make sure you're filling that out, filling in your reports, your yellow card reports. Hopefully everyone continues to use the match confirmation template that we sent out a couple of weeks ago. And if you're having problems, again, get in touch with Scott or myself or Tim or Sean or Ozzy just to let us know if we need to do something better for you if you're not getting what you need. So I appreciate everybody joining us. It's a quick one tonight. We'll get out of here. Touch more on